La 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 la. Bum bum bum. Digga-da-dum.
Hello and welcome to Andres Who Knits. I'm Andy and welcome to this little show about knitting, spinning, and general craftiness. This week we've got a giveaway to wrap up and I have three awesome giveaways to announce. One of which I'm certain you don't want to miss, so stay tuned towards the end. Also, the virtual knitting groups have been organized. The thread is still open. But if you are late to joining that thread, feel free to reach out to others that are late to the thread and self-organize if you like. Also, I've been back to dyeing some yarns, and I've got some Christmas sock blanks to show you that'll be going into the shop next week. And of course, knitting and spinning this week to share with you. So let's get started with some knitting. For knitting this week, I did almost finished my Rhinebeck sweater. I have ends to weave in and it needs to be blocked. And I've had it in this state for at least a week and a half and have not bothered weaving in the ends or blocking it. But I still wanted to show it to you. Next week I could probably model it for you. But it's the Improv sweater pattern by Fringe Association, which I've said before is more of a recipe than a pattern of how to take the yarn that you have, your body measurements, and create your own custom sweater. And for me, I used a worsted weight yarn and I picked out a diamond motif. And it fits pretty well before blocking, so I'm pretty sure it'll fit well after blocking. So I just wanted to show this to you. I am going to try very hard to weave in the ends and block it before I talk to you next week. And about the only other thing I have on my needles now is my color stranded sweater. And let me show you that. So I've been doing a big push of trying to get all my works in progress off my needles. I got some socks off my needles, that sweater off my needles. I have one more sweater on my needles, and then my Cozy Memories blanket, and that is it. But this last work in progress is it's still got quite a bit of work left. The pattern's called Next Year in Lerwick, although I'm way off the pattern at this point. And I've got it completed from the collar to the bottom ribbing, but the sleeves still need to be finished. And I really do not feel like finishing this sweater. I was watching Amy Beth the Fat Squirrel, I don't know how many episodes ago it was, but she had a yoked sweater with color work, and she actually just put ribbing on the sleeves and made it a short sleeve sweater, and then wore a long sleeve tee under it, and it looked really nice. So I'm thinking I might actually do that with this sweater. Just make it short sleeved and call it a day, so it's just finally off my needles. And I do think I'll wear it that way. A color stranded wool sweater that's long sleeved might be a little warm for Virginia anyway, so keeping it short sleeved and wearing a long sleeve tee under it, I think that's a good way to go. So maybe next time we talk, I will have this finished as well, which would be really, really nice. I don't know about you, but every now and then I have this urge to do something different. I get to where I'm browsing through Ravelry for some inspiration, and something new, different, and maybe a little extreme pops out at me, which is how I ended up knitting hexagon socks and how I ended up knitting jungle socks. Well, sock, I only made one of these. There's a pattern that jumped out at me called Diamondback Socks. And it is so unlike anything else I've ever seen. And even though I'm working to clear off my needles, I cast it on anyway. And let me show you what the stitch pattern looks like. I mean, it is gorgeous. The reason I decided to cast these on is because I've not seen anything like this before. And it does remarkable things with variegated yarns. This yarn here is from my friend Heidi, who's the dyer behind Undead Yarns. Let me show you her label. This is in her Wild Rumpus colorway. And I don't think I have a picture of it before I wound it into a ball. But it's one of those variegated yarns that when it's in the hank, it's got like defined stretches of color. So like there's a stretch of pink, and there's a stretch of charcoal, and a stretch of yellow. And those space dyed yarns are what's recommended for this particular pattern. So the pattern shows up at its fullest. And I just think it is gorgeous. Now, the one problem I have with these more extreme sock designs is that it's very difficult to determine the fit, which size you should cast on, because clearly this isn't going to just be a basic 60-stitch sock. And because of the pattern, it actually around the leg of the sock is a 68-stitch sock, even at the very smallest size. So it's really tough to figure out if it's going to fit you well or not. And I got to be honest, like the hexagon socks don't fit well. The jungle socks don't fit well. And it turns out that the Diamondback socks, they don't fit well. And in fact, this sock, I picked the size small because I had intended it for my daughter Rachel, who has about a US size 5.5 foot, and it is far too small to fit her foot. It'll go over her heel, but just barely, and it like squeezes the life out of her foot. It's funny, it fits her ankle well, but it's this gusset that just doesn't have enough stretch, give room in it. And when you go through the patterns or the completed projects on Ravelry, a lot of people have rated this pattern really highly, but when I posted this to Instagram, several people said they knitted the sock and had the same issue, that the size small, the width across like the heel was too small, even though it fit in the leg and the foot. And when they knitted a size up, that gusset area fit really well, but the leg and the foot are too baggy. So I was thinking I would just rip this sock back to before I start the gusset and then do a traditional heel flap and turn, so I know I'll have enough room. But I think, was it Spinning Laura? A friend of mine on Instagram, forgive me if I've gotten the name wrong, suggested just ripping it back to before the gusset and making this into a pair of fingerless mitts. And I think I might do that. The stitch pattern really, I think it's stunning, especially in Heidi's yarn. So these might become fingerless mitts. Or I might do a traditional heel flap and gusset. I don't know. But I wanted to show this to you. The designer, her name is Kristen Hall, think. And she's the same designer who designed the hexagon socks. Very, very clever and creative. I've thought about knitting the hexagon socks again, and if I do, I will definitely take the lessons I learned the first time and apply them to the second pair of socks. And even so, I don't think they'll be the best fitting pair of socks ever. But they're really cool and they're fun to knit, just something different. So, yeah. I don't know, what do you think? Fingerless mitts or a traditional heel turn and gusset? I don't know. So that's it for knitting. Rachel has worked on her hat, but she's sick this week. She was going to join me and show me her hat today, but poor thing's caught a cold, so maybe next time I'll have her on. A friend of mine, one of my very favorite internet people and real life friend, Melissa, the spicy homemaker, is headed to Virginia next week. So I'm hoping to get to spend some time with her, and if we have time, maybe we'll Periscope or do a little video together for you guys. I do want to get back to my knitting machine. I think that's part of the push to clear my needles, is so I can cast some stuff on my machine without feeling like I have a bunch of things hanging over my head. I used to be a monogamous knitter, but then I discovered the joy of having multiple projects going all at one time. But I think the longer a project hangs over my head, the heavier it feels. So it'll be nice to get some of these long-term projects completed The blanket, I don't think there's ever going to be an end in sight on that one. So I don't count that as my long-term projects or in my long-term projects. But yeah, next up on the machine, I bought that Capretta cashmere nylon merino yarn. I think I'm going to try for a cabled sweater on that. Maybe some Christmas knitting too on that. It would be fast and easy to get some cardigans maybe made for my nieces and nephews. I don't know. We'll see. But I have been doing some spinning. Let me show you that. This week I've been working on spinning Buddha's fur. If you're new to the podcast, Buddha is my Angora bunny. And this is the first time I've actually collected his fur to spin. And in order to spin it, I'm blending it with merino wool using my hand carders. I've had these hand carders for a while, but I haven't really used them. So it's been interesting kind of getting the hang of these. There are a couple of uses for hand carders that I know of. One is for taking something like, say, merino top where all the hairs are super aligned and using the hand carders to tangle them a bit, roll them off into rollags, which spirals the fur, and then spinning from that. The reason you would want to do that is because the tangling of the hairs and then the spiraling in addition traps air and gives you a warmer yarn. But that's not why I'm using the hand carders. I'm using them for another reason you would use them, which is to blend fiber. So I'm loading these up with merino wool, adding about 50% wool and then 50% of Buddha's fur, moving them from hand card to hand card, and then rolling it off into rollags. Now, the way I am making rollags, I'm just rolling them off the hand carders into these really loose, light rollags. And they spin up beautifully. Some people will actually, instead of just rolling them off easily into rollags, they'll use dowels to kind of pull the fiber off into really tight rollags. And I think that is the benefit of doing that is that those tight rollags hold their shape a lot better, which makes them easier to handle and to sell and to ship. I think if I were to try to sell or ship these, they would probably fall to pieces in the process. But since I'm taking them straight from my hand carders to the spinning wheel, it works out just fine for me. I aimed for a 50-50 blend of wool and Angora for a couple of reasons. The Angora that I took from Buddha is kind of short. It's about like 1.25 inches long. So I'm not experienced with spinning really short fibers, and I know what I do know about it is you need a pretty tight twist to keep the singles together or to keep the yarn together. So I figured if I had at least half longer fibers, this longer merino fiber, maybe I wouldn't need as much twist in it. And the other thing I read about blending Angora with other fibers is that if it's 50% Angora or more, the resulting yarn feels a lot more like Angora and a little less like wool. But once you get 50% wool or more, it starts feeling more like wool and less like Angora. Like that 50-50 mark will take you either way. And I really want this to have a lot of the qualities of Angora. Because Angora is finer than cashmere. The micron level is actually smaller than cashmere, which makes it softer to the touch. It's also 7 times warmer than wool that I've read. It's got some really lovely characteristics that I wanted to make sure were noticed in the finished product. So we'll see. These Rollags, if they're any indication, are ridiculously light and fluffy, and they feel like what you would imagine a cloud would feel like. So I'm excited. I have one finished bobbin spun up of the Buddha fur. I think I'm going to go for a 2-ply. I've got a second one on the wheel now. And I think in the end, I'm going to end up dyeing it because Buddha is kind of parts of him are cream color, parts of them are caramel color, parts of them are gray. And the end result is kind of a dingy cream, which is not the prettiest color to me. So I think I'm going to dye it. And my kids are thinking a soft pink, but I'm envisioning like a caramel color. So we'll see. I do have a drum carder tucked away in my craft room, and I decided to not go with the drum carder and to actually go with the hand cards because from what I've read is the micron count of Angora makes those hairs so fine that it needs a delicate touch to keep from tearing the fiber. And I don't know if it's true or not, but I read that the drum carder is harsher, it's mechanical, you don't have control over the pressure you're applying it, and it can really damage the Angora hairs. And with as short as the clippings are that I got from Buddha, I do not need the hairs being torn in half and being taken from like 1.25 inches to what would that make it? A little over 1/2 inch. So Corey's laughing at me because I can't do the math. But anyway, that enough about spinning. I want to show you what I've been doing with dyeing. I pulled out the dye pots this week and all my dyes and dyed up some Christmas sock blanks that I wanted to share with you. I've got 3-4 designs and they're going to be going into the shop next weekend. So depending on when you're watching this, it's the scheduled shop updates are for November 19th, which is a Saturday at 7 p.m. and then Sunday, November 20th at 10 a.m. And I'll put links in the show notes. But anyway, I thought these were really, really cute. Some vintage Santas, some elf feet. I did the elf feet in a couple different colorways. And I've got some reindeer in red socks and scarves. These are on Sparkle. And then I've got a few of these. I don't have many of these, but some little birds on gifts in snow that are also on Sparkle. And I thought I'd share a little bit about sock blanks and the process of dyeing them. There are a few different, well, there's more than a few different ways to approach sock blanks. But my approach is more of a painterly approach, which means a couple of things. When you approach a sock blank as a dyer instead of a painter, you're dealing with like wet dyes. Typically you pour them on and it fully saturates all the strands of a sock blank, which means you get full saturation all the way to the back of the sock blank. And when you knit something like that up, you end up with a sock that could look something like this. It just depends on the way it's dyed and the way it's approached. But when I approach a sock blank, it's more like a painter, which means I'm I'm thickening the dyes to make them more like the consistency of paint, so that when I apply the dye to the sock blank, it doesn't move and I get a crisp image, or at least as crisp of an image as I can when dealing with yarn. And so what that means is when I apply the dye that's thickened into paint on the top of a sock blank, in order to keep the image crisp and it from spreading, it also means it doesn't penetrate always fully to the back of the sock blank. So the back of the sock blank is typically lighter than the front of the sock blank. And the end result of something like that is a sock that might knit up something like this. So you can see some of the white or the light of the back showing up through the knitted sock itself. I love the results of both. I think the little light parts in the end result of a sock like this end up looking like little white speckles. It kind of gives it a little more dimension, I think, and kind of a vintage faded feel as well, versus a sock like this. And these are both socks that were knit up from sock blanks that I dyed. But I thought I'd point that out in case you're new to sock blanks, what you might expect from the end result of knitting with some of these. And I do have a few of these sheep blanks painted up as well. These are probably the only non-Christmas ones I'm going to have available in the next shop update. And this might be the last shop update for 2016. I reserve the right to change my mind, but I'm not planning on any more shop updates this year. Although Monday I have one more Christmas design in mind that I might include. Well, but we'll just see how it goes. So we have a giveaway to take care of. Sharon over at Knit Style Yarn donated this beautiful sock yarn called Pumpkin Spice Latte. I used random.org and selected a winner, and it selected Post 257, who is KY Munchkin. So congratulations. If you'll message me your address through Ravelry, I'll get this yarn out to you as soon as possible. And thank you so much, Sharon, for donating your gorgeous yarn. My friend Sarah over at Naughty Gnome Crafts, who is a very talented knitter, dyer, sewer, you name it. She's amazing at it, fiber artist included. Contacted me and generously offered a giveaway of her new Christmas kits. I love Sarah's bags. I own several. They're amazingly well constructed. The fabrics she chooses are always gorgeous, and I'm thrilled that I get to offer you guys this amazing giveaway. Sarah has partnered with a talented indie dyer called Sonnet Up the Moon to create these Christmas kits. They're a very limited exclusive run. There's going to be 8 winter kits and 8 Christmas kits. And what each kit includes is one of Sarah's beautiful project bags, a gorgeous skein of sock yarn from Sonnet Up the Moon, 2 mini skeins, and a stitch marker. If you are interested in one of these kits, again, it's a very limited run. I think there's 8 of each. They're available at naughtygnome.storeenvy.com. And Sarah has sent me one to give away to you. If you are interested in winning one of these beautiful kits from Sarah, head over to the Andre Sue Knits Ravelry group. I'll have a thread open there. And if you would answer the question, what features would your perfect project bag have? Reply to that thread and answer that question, and you'll be entered for a chance to win. A couple of details about the kits. The yarn is a sparkle yarn, which is probably my favorite kind of yarn. And the fabric is a high-quality sateen fabric, although I can vouch for the quality of Sarah's work. It's beautiful. So thank you, Sarah, for that. I also have a couple of other giveaways to announce. We have a giveaway for the Tinctoria pattern, which was written and designed by my friend Emily over at the Fibertown podcast. It's a gorgeous cowl pattern which is worsted weight on the outside. You use a provisional cast on, and then you pick those stitches up and knit a fingering weight lining on the inside. So I'm sure the end result is something totally smooshy and warm and cozy. So if you would like a chance to win a copy of the Tinctoria pattern, again, head over to the Andre Sue Knits Ravelry group. There'll be a prompt for you to get yourself entered to win. And we also have a giveaway for the Douglas Pine Shawlette pattern. That is a pattern by Rachel Barnes. It's a shawlette that's knit from the top down in a semi-crescent shape. The body of the shawlette is knit in stockinette stitch with a beaded tree motif along the bottom. And the cast off is worked with a sideways knit lace edging. And there's an optional beaded detail as well. So check that out as well. Again, Andre Sue Knits Ravelry group. The last little thing I had for you was a shout out for a new podcast from my friend Jennifer Edwards. Before I started podcasting, I was a blogger, and just like there's a community of podcasters, there's definitely a community of bloggers. And one of my first internet knitting friends I ever made was Jennifer Edwards. She's a designer and a teacher, a painter. She's a beautiful artist, and she just started her own podcast. Besides all her artistic talents, she's also just a lovely human being. And I just thought I'd give her a shout out if you want to check her out. It's called the Knitterly Arts Podcast. And so, yeah, that's it. That's all I have for you this time. As always, thank you so much for joining me. Bye.
La 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 boom la 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 bum bum bum.